Whenever you're ready.
And we're live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Scituate Town of Scituate Board of Assessors meeting for February 8th. At this point in time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and have an acceptance of our agenda.
So moved.
Motion to accept the agenda by Mr. Guard, seconded by myself. All those signified by saying aye.
Aye, Steve Guard.
Aye, John Dennehy. I guess, do we need to take a roll call vote on that, or is this sufficient? What's that?
I think roll call is kind of the norm nowadays, since we're.
So Jackie, can you have a roll call vote?
Yes.
You need to say roll call vote, Mr. Guard.
Mr. Guard,
Aye.
John? Mr.
Yes, okay. It has been accepted. So our first item on the agenda is, are there any walk-ins? Is there anybody at Town Hall looking to come in to ask any questions of the board?
No, they're out.
Seeing none. Are there any in the audience that we have? If anybody's watching this, please wave, or if Seth, anybody see anything?
You have
Maybe
nothing.
not. I just want to confirm it. All right. Seeing that, let's move on to the next one, which is new business. We are here to discuss water lien abatement for 158 First Parish Road. And if I am not mistaken, let's see, that should have been part of our agenda, correct? Or our
Yes,
submittals?
it's a couple of emails. It's not your standard package. This isn't a water lien situation where anyone's requesting that the water lien be abated and taken off the table. That typically, as you know, John, that goes before the Board of Selectmen through an entire process, and there's a big packet. And this is a situation where the wrong property was liened. Number 158 was liened. Unfortunately, 158 First Parish, which is a single-family home. The lien should have been placed on 158 Parish was liened. 156 First Parish is 6 condos. And what should have happened in a perfect world, 1/6 of the outstanding water should have been attached to each one of those parcels. What the finance director, town administrator, and the water department are looking for the board to do is to abate this in full, because it's obviously on the wrong property. It will go back to the regular water billing system, so the charges aren't disappearing. And if those charges are not paid next year, they'll be liened properly in fiscal '23.
So what are they looking for us?
To abate it off of 158 First Parish.
Okay. Steve, any questions?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Guard, seconded by myself. All those signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And Jackie, can you give us a roll call vote, please, on that motion?
My roll call vote, Mr. Dennehy,
Yes.
Mr. Guard,
Yes.
All right. Moving on to the next agenda item, happens to be a review of a 61A application for 125 Border Street. And that's part of our packet of information that was provided. It appears to be that they are looking to they have 6 acres and they're using it for a hayfield. And Joe, anything else?
They actually have, there's 17 acres in this parcel. This is the old Bleaky parcel. It was peeled off. It's completely vacant right now. It used to be part of 143 Border Street. This new parcel is 125 Border Street. So the applicant is piggybacking on the Bleakley's, prior application and prior approvals from years past. Approval of this would constitute a release of the old lien. We still haven't released the lien on this land from when the Bleakies owned the property. So a release and a new lien will be placed. It is Mr. Christensen's intention to build one single house on this property and the rest of the property would be classified. Hence the 16.2 acres being requested to be classified as chapter land. And I've seen the preliminary layout. What you'll see from the street are the two buildings that exist there right now. There'll be a winding driveway and the house will be down close to the river. The intention being to keep that same open space look and feel along Border Street.
Steve, do you have any questions?
Yeah, one thing, Joe, for clarification. So because it was in 61A with the prior owner, we don't have to worry about the 2-year ownership requirement?
I believe so. I mean, I can certainly investigate that further, but not only Mr. Christensen's, but the Bleaky's attorney, both parties agreed, because that was, Mr. Christensen had to sign a document that said his intention was to maintain the property as chapter land.
Mhm.
And as a result of signing that document, the town did not have its first right of refusal. So
You mean like he had to sign a covenant when he bought the property?
Exactly.
Recorded, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any issues. I was just asking for clarification purposes because Mr. Christensen appears to be a new owner. And I would think that the statute, if not specifically, the spirit of the statute would be more so that it has been in chapter land for the 2 years prior, as opposed to own the property for 2 years prior. Because we've run into this ownership issue before, and we've had to defer people on a 61A classification until such time as they've owned it for the requisite period. But so anyway, that was my only point. I have no problem with the application as it exists.
I have a question, and so it was chapter 61A property, okay?
Yes.
Prior, it's bought, because it's not being sold for profit or fair market value, the town doesn't get its option. I get that. But it's bought to maintain it in chapter 61A, but they're building a house on it.
Right. So that part of the land, that 40,000 square feet will be taxed at the market rate, approximately $1.2 million just for the land.
So, but Joe, here's my point. If the 60, is this the house lot a part of the 6 acres, or is it exclusive of the 6 acres?
Exclusive. It's actually 17 acres, and he's asking for 16.2 acres to be classified. So he's excluding the land area for the house.
So was the 17 acres all chapter 61A?
Out of the 16.2, well, roughly 16 acres would be chapter.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is, if you
In
had
the past
17
it was,
of
yes.
chapter 61A land, okay, go with me here. Chapter 61A land for 17 acres. Somebody buys it for chapter 61A. Then they say, I'm actually going to carve out a piece to build a house.
Hmm.
That's not part of chapter 61A.
Right.
Wouldn't that trigger the provision that the town have a right of first refusal?
It went to
And-
legal
and the
counsel.
provision.
Yeah. I mean, from the
And I
very
suppose the
beginning,
town's not going to buy half an acre, probably not, but I'm saying it's just kind of curious because I'm like, if you're buying for chapter 61A, you're going to maintain it for chapter 61A. What right does somebody have to then to turn around and say, well, I'm going to carve out 2 acres, 4 acres. I'll build one house, but it doesn't trigger the provision, which I think it would.
So
Maybe the
in
town
my-
had
Yeah,
denied, the town is.
John makes a good point. In my experience, having had to deal with this in the past with a developer, absolutely carving out the land, provided that it was under 61A before, triggers the right of first refusal and the 5-year look back to pay the taxes for the 5-year to develop the property, even for a single family home. So I think boiling John's question down, it's really simple. Was the area that's carved out for the house under 61A before? And if
Yeah.
so, then that needs to be released. We need to apply the look back period for the 61A development. If it wasn't, which I thought all that land was under 61A, but I honestly don't know. I
it
did
was,
work-
except for the houses. 143 was not.
This is a new house they're building, right?
Exactly. exactly.
Can you, Joe, can you maybe, we can maybe tee this up with a question to the town council, maybe through the town administrator?
Sure.
Just to say that, we just want clarification on this half acre, I guess, if that's what it is, or whatever maybe it's 3/4 acre, whatever it may be, but how is it that that's getting carved out from what in essence is chapter 61A, which we assumed it all was? And it not having the town's first right of refusal, or why it doesn't go back. I'm just kind of curious out of it. I'm like, I don't think it's kill them for
I'm
another.
wondering, I have a thought. If Joe can confirm for us that the 16.2 acres that is in the application to remain classified was classified before, then I wouldn't have a problem voting to allow the application. What I would like to do is to find out about the other piece and say, hey, was that in 61A? And if so, did we get a crack at it, and do we get some money back? Because, there is that provision, the clawback provision. So so my question would be, if the 16.2 was in, if Joe's confident that that was in classification and it's remaining in classification, then I have no problem with it.
Steve, I'm with you on that. That makes perfect sense. I don't want to delay it, but I'm just kind of curious why the half was, or whatever percentage of not the full is excluded, or why it wouldn't be. So Joe, can you get information for us for the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Good.
very good question, John, and it's a good exercise, and it's good that, we don't want to miss something. And I would be very suspect that it wasn't in classification, because it was.
Yeah, there's got to be something. Maybe there's a carve out provision within chapter 61A that if you're building a single family home, kind of like typical farmers, they need to build a house, then that's maybe the exception. Obviously, I don't think these are going to be farmers, but regardless, I'd like to know that nuance if that's the case.
I think there is an exception, John. You're absolutely right, but I think it applies to family members, because we did it on Stockbridge Road for that family that owns the cornfield over there. They carved off a couple pieces, and I thought it had to be conveyed to a family member, right, Joe?
That's you're 100% correct. That refers to the sale of chapter lands. Family members trump the first right of refusal to the town. Yes, that happened on Long Meadow Road as well with Mr. Costello. He sold off.
And that makes sense, because if you think about it, if you have land that's agriculture, farmers, people, their kids, traditionally in the past, they used to have big families to work the field. So they'd carve off things for family members to be able to live on the farm without having to go beyond. So that makes perfect sense. This one, I'm not sure. Maybe it is a family member. But Joe, if you can find that, that'd be great.
I will.
Motion?
So I move to allow the application to treat 16.2 acres at 125 Border Street, parcel 629E as chapter 61A exempt land.
Motion by Mr. Guard, seconded by myself. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Steve, aye.
Jackie, can you do a roll call vote on this
By
motion?
roll call, Mr. Dennehy,
Yes.
Mr. Gard,
Yes.
So moved and it passed. Good. Moving on to the next one, happens to be a discuss abatement of taxes for town purchase. That's at 433, 459 Chief Justice Cushing Highway for chapter 59, section 72A as in Adam. Joe, this happens to be.
This is the property the town purchased for 1.35 million on 3A near Factory Pond. Opposite side of Town Hall, heading towards Marshfield. There were 10 lots that they purchased.
Yep.
And obviously, we're not gonna collect taxes from ourselves. So this is the provision of the law that's used to abate those taxes subsequent to a purchase by a town.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to have the town pay our taxes, but I guess it's paying ourselves to pay taxes, so it makes no sense, and that's the reason why it's looking for it. Seems very straightforward. Steve, questions?
No questions. I will move to allow the application for a tax exemption on the town acquired property.
Motion by Mr. Guard, seconded by myself. All those signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Jackie, if you don't mind, if we could have a roll
By
call.
roll
vote
call,
on that?
Mr. Dennehy,
Yes,
Mr. Guard,
Yes.
and the motion has passed. Thank you. Okay. Before we get to the executive session, I did want to bring up an issue that was raised by Mr. Frank Badger. Joe, I'm not sure if you've talked to him in the past, but Mr. Badger lives on Forest Ave or Forest Lane, which I believe is Merritt Woods. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's in that vicinity, Steve. The question he had was that he said that the swap that the town had about 4 or 5 years ago, which is about an acre of land on Chief Justice Cushing, basically a little further down from the police or the public safety building, still remains as town-owned land, and that it does not indicate that it has been actually sold or transferred to the what was, I think, Jack Livingston and or a guy named Callanan, which I think is now rumored to be a potential 40B project with Toll Brothers, which is the area that's surrounding Booth Hill and Chief Justice Cushing and everything else. I told him I would look into it. Joe, I don't know if I thought he said he did go to the town assessors. He may have, he may not have, maybe he went to another office, maybe, but I was wondering, is there something, Joe, you could take a look in for us on that just to see? I was under the understanding when the Board of Selectmen had purchased it, that there was a conveyance, and evidently it doesn't show that, which means there must not be a deed of conveyance. Any way you could maybe track that down and give us some information on it?
I can give you a full 5-minute presentation and answer all your questions on this issue. I'm very familiar with it. It came up because if you look at our town maps, that carved out parcel is still, like you just said, is showing as being town owned. The conveyance occurred. The town did do a land swap, and that land is owned by the abutter, of which there's been discussion that Toll Brothers may put in a affordable housing development. So that actually did occur. And we actually are taxing the new owners as a result of that transfer. The maps have not been updated because while the transfer occurred, ownership transferred, there was never any plan filed.
So it doesn't have a plan.
That triangle piece has never had a plan. And I've talked to the seller's counsel, and they are in the process of basically taking what was transferred and putting that on a map and recording it. So that's why it looks the way it does. And I was hoping to get that changed while we did our map updates. I contacted a series of attorneys. Many times there was an insinuation that there was a plan available. It turns out there isn't. They just, when that transfer occurred, there was no Form A or any kind of plans recorded or even submitted to the town.
So, all right, so let me get my bearings here. So how did they convey? By meets and bounds description or by a
Meets
sketch
and
plan?
bounds. Exactly. No reference to a plan at all, just meets and bounds.
But that's not appropriate under the subdivision approval statute. It has to be done by plan these days, unless it's already a created lot. Even if it's a non-buildable lot, it has to be done by plan. That's bizarre.
It took everybody by surprise, actually. Yep.
It's 81L. I know it's an exempt, it's certainly exempt from subdivision control because it's a non-building lot. It's an approval not required, but you're supposed to have a plan,
You could even do an 81X possibly, Steve.
Yeah.
Just, they don't want to go through a full blown, but got a surveyor out there. And I'm a little, unfortunately, this is the first I heard of it when I spoke to Mr. Badger. And it wasn't until I asked you the question, Joe, that it dawned on me that I bet you they didn't have a plan, and you just mentioned it. And I'm
Yeah.
like sitting here going, how simple. They already have surveyors out there, at least they did, especially when they came to the Board of Selectmen and said, this is the area that we want in order to swap. I'm shocked that there was no plan. And I'm also shocked that when the transfer and conveyance happened, that town council should have known that. And again, this goes back 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm stunned because
I still think they need an A&R plan. The planning board has to sign off on the creation of the lot. And it doesn't have to sign off on the conveyance, but you're creating a new lot. You can't create a lot today in modern times without a plan. Back before subdivision control, you could convey meets and bounds and all that. Or if it was already a meets and bounds description and it was in separate ownership, you could certainly convey it. You don't need a
Right.
plan to convey something that doesn't have a plan. But if you create an area today, you have to have a plan to create that area, and the planning board has to sign off on it.
And they should have realized that, especially considering what was conveyed to the town, Joe. That begs the question, do they?
Did we get a plan for the deed that we got? Yeah.
That's a good question. I didn't check
What about
that.
on the flip side of this, because I'm now saying they didn't get it on the conveyance on the frontage. What did they do on the back end? Because
Good point.
it would be a real
Good point.
cluster.
Yeah, because it's a
So
swap.
that needs to
Good
be
point.
needed out before they even file with, if they're filing, which is the rumor that they're going to file 40B. They got to get that all worked out with before they get to zoning.
Yeah.
Any
It
event,
sounds like they will.
thank you, because I can get back in touch with them and tell them, okay, it sounds to me like there's some of a cluster of issues that are still trying to work their way through.
Well, we all know that if it's a 40B coming through, it will have a plan. That piece of land will be on a plan that will be filed. There's no question about it. So that'll get cleaned up. You can tell Mr. Badger, this is definitely going to get cleaned up. Yeah, so. Okay.
All right, well, good. I didn't mean to take any more time. I guess now we are going into executive session unless there's other new business. Steve, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay. Seeing that, I guess at this point in time, I am going to suggest that we have a motion to go into executive session. We're going to be dealing with overvaluation applications 7, 9, 10, 13, 14, 17, and 22, exemption on a 41A, and then a review of a trust for ownership eligibility. We are not going to come back into open meeting. And so therefore, I would accept a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Guard, seconded by myself. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And Jackie, if we could have a roll call vote to go into executive session.
Mr. Dennehy,
Yes.
Mr. Gard,
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending our meeting, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. I think, Joe, we don't have one listed, but it will be in the month of March. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I was going to discuss it with both of you. Either the last week in February or the first week of March would be great.
Okay. So be tuned. Town website will let you know exactly what date. It will probably be the last week of February, but we'll see at this point. All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Seth.